Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerdworld Empire, once again bringing you Star Trek lore. On one of the greatest factions in the Alpha or Beta, or even now reaching the Gamma and Delta quadrants, we introduce the legendary Klingons. Specifically today, we're talking about Klingon intelligence. We're not talking about how smart the average Klingon is, oh no, we're talking about their equivalents to the Tal Shiar, Obsidian Order, Section 31, which they're probably more akin to than your conventional Starfleet intelligence. Before we get started discussing the shadowy agency of the Empire, please like, share and subscribe. Comment down below, and if you enjoy this video or any others on this channel and want to keep up to date with the uploads, which admittedly at the moment have been a little scattered thanks to the fact that I started a new job recently and I've been extremely busy, hence the rather scattered uploads. Hopefully that'll be corrected soon. My time is getting a bit more freed up now. Hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date on all uploads from this channel. With that out of the way, Klingon intelligence sometimes might even be considered an oxymoron. Perceptually, the Klingons almost seem like a savage race of barbarians. This is loosely because perception of Klingon culture, the Klingons often encountered by other races are quite violent individuals. Even Klingons that come from a more peaceable background, because of the inherent, intrinsic and somewhat genetic state of the Klingons being a generally more violent people, they are perceived as a violent race. But you've got to understand that unlike Starfleet, that's a mostly peaceful and exploratory agency that sends its best and brightest out to make peaceful first contact, the Klingon Defense Force, or KDF, is a military agency. They are sending their best and brightest, but they're not sending their best and brightest peacemakers, they're sending their best and brightest warriors. So a lot of races' first encounters with Klingons is with these soldiers of the Empire, not with its diplomats, its politicians, its scientists, its philosophers. Every violent culture in history, like the Spartans, the Romans, the British Empire, you name it, they had a dark side to them, certainly, and a perception to their enemies was that they were just violent barbarians. But that was by no means strictly the case. Not every individual person is like that. Not every policy passed by the government of an imperialist state is to propagate the empire, is to, oppress and destroy others. That's not everything that they are. And as a result, the Klingons being seen as mindless barbarians is as inaccurate as any perception of any violent power can be. The Klingons do value intelligence gathering. Know your enemy. It makes them easier to destroy, to conquer, or simply to keep at bay. Klingons are not stupid. They are prone to infighting, but this is simply how Klingons advance. They'll fight one another. The strongest survive. The strongest get in charge. Doesn't mean they have to kill each other, but it does mean generally the strongest, greatest warrior is the one sitting at the top. And within Klingon culture, intelligence agents are viewed with something of distrust, disdain, maybe even a little by some, but certainly they're not trusted and they're seen as dishonorable individuals. It is also noted that if a Klingon intelligence operative fails in their mission, they are dishonored, potentially exiled from the Empire, and depending on severity, might even be executed. But that said, although the Klingon intelligence agency is relatively shadowy and not as prominent as the intelligence agencies from some other, again, prominent Alpha and Beta quadrant powers, it doesn't mean that they don't accomplish anything or aren't actually effective at their role. They simply have to walk a different, finer line than, say, Starfleet intelligence agents. Some notable examples of Klingon intelligence operations would be an operation in the 22nd century conducted by Klang. He had information encoded onto his DNA in his blood itself to bring back to the Empire, allowing them to unfoil a plot being perpetrated by the Suliban and the Temporal Cold War, bigger story, to basically cause a civil war within the Empire. Yes, they required a little help from Starfleet and the Vulcans to get it done, but they did get it done. Later, a much more prominent and more famous Klingon intelligence operative we know as Arne Darwin He, in 2268, attempted to sabotage a shipment of This is hard to say. Quadrotiticale. I can hear it said in my head. Just saying it out loud, God, that's hard. The Quadrotiticale, basically a genetically engineered type of grain or seed being bound for Sherman's planet to allow Federation settlers to thrive there. The Klingons were basically trying to undermine this operation because they wanted the planet themselves. Whatever. He failed once again in his mission and then became exiled from the Klingon Empire for the next 100 years, but was smart enough, cunning enough to eke out a basic living until an opportunity presented itself to use time travel via a Bajoran orb of time to fix his mistake in the past. We see this in the operation known as Trials and Tribble-Actions, and he was countered by the crew of Deep Space Nine and the USS Defiant. Other examples of Klingon intelligence operatives were Borak Atoll and Morka, who basically were trying to spy on a Romulan delegation but got themselves caught by Starfleet because they're not actually, they weren't that good at it. They failed and got themselves a slap wrist and kicked off the station. But you see, through the animosity between the Klingons and the Romulans, it makes sense that you would want to keep an eye on your enemy. It's no different than what any other intelligence agency would do. The difference is the Klingon agents try to present themselves as everyday Klingons, just like Starfleet do. But again, that perception of everyday Klingon is one of a warrior. So even when you're dealing with cunning spies, men and women that actually know how to do this, they know their spycraft. These aren't incompetent individuals who don't know how to gather information, who don't have the tools, the technology, the gadgets and the training and the experience to basically blend into the background and gather information for their empire. They still have to be perceived as these ruthless, brutal barbarians. In some ways, I can see this being an advantage to the Klingons because it would allow their enemies to perhaps be both a little afraid of them, not wanting to challenge them, but also underestimate them. As the Romulans often thought that Klingons were brutish, savage barbarians that every Romulan zoo should have a pair of. This belies a Romulan, basic racism towards Klingons. And this generalizing of Klingons of this as being a sub-Romulan species, a suboptimal, sub-intelligent, lesser race than they themselves. Now, to be fair, the Romulans kind of see everybody like this, but they particularly held a grudge against Klingons. They hated the Klingon Empire far more than they disliked the Federation, even though realistically the Federation was probably a greater rival to them. But that said, the Klingons did value intelligence gathering. Their intelligence services were known to share information with those of the Federation, gathering information during the Dominion War, during their war with the Cardassians, often uncovering plots and agents of enemy governments, although they were blind to the fact that apparently Martok had been replaced by a changeling, so they could be better. But that said, Starfleet, not always the best at that either. They had changelings running around Starfleet Command and they didn't know, but at least they tried to do something, whereas these didn't. And we know that Section 31 was also experimenting on changelings during the war. It developed bioweapons to defeat them and just went all out, as did the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order, in an effort to defeat them, whereas the Klingon intelligence services seem to me to be underfunded and greatly underutilized, seen as a useful tool for war, but not maybe as useful as a bird of prey. But what does everybody out there think? Do you think the Klingon intelligence services play off this underestimation that their enemies might have of them, meaning they're actually far more insidious and more effective than perhaps we're giving them credit for, and certainly what their enemies are giving them credit for? And they hide behind this veneer of being savage, brutal barbarians, when in fact they're actually cunning, highly intelligent, highly skilled operatives that should not be underestimated, and certainly shouldn't turn your back on them, because unlike a normal Klingon, I think they'd stab you in it. But that brings us to the end of this video and this exploration of Klingon intelligence, which is such a shadowy agency, so covert, so quiet, that we know actually less about it than what we know about Section 31. But what we do know tells us that we should be watching the Klingons more closely, perhaps. If you enjoyed this video, again, thank you for watching all the way to the end. Like, share and subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon if you want to stay up to date with all the uploads from this channel. And have a great day.